In this explainer, we're going to explore something truly extraordinary. Today, we're unpacking the Gilde-Model. This is an incredibly ambitious masterwork developed by CyberMinds Technology and Research over in Norway. And this isn't just another theory of physics. It's a unified framework that attempts to seamlessly stitch together the hard physics of the universe, the emergence of human cognition, and the future of artificial intelligence. It's a massive, sweeping vision, and we are going to break it all down step by step. Okay, let's dive right into this. What if the universe isn't actually made of things, but of relations? We're so used to thinking of reality as being built out of tiny, solid objects, right? Just particles bouncing around in empty space. But the Guild model asks us to completely invert that kind of thinking. What if a thing is really just a knot of relationships? We're going to build a universe from absolute scratch today, and we're going to do it using nothing but connections. So here's our roadmap for today, what the creators actually call the Nordic master chain. We'll look at the fragmented state of modern science, establish the 4 fundamental axioms, explore relational geometry, climb the consciousness ladder, and finally arrive at autopoietic superintelligence. Let's jump in. Section 1, the fragmented picture of science, and the core problem with modern science today. Modern science is undeniably brilliant, but let's be honest, our current picture is heavily fragmented. Quantum mechanics perfectly describes the microscopic world, and general relativity handles the cosmic scale, but they fundamentally contradict each other. We also have fields like biology and psychology that struggle to trace their exact origins back to those underlying quantum fields. Well, the Gilde model solves this fragmentation not by throwing away established science, and definitely not by discovering some new magical particle. Instead, it proposes a unified relational reality. By making relations the fundamental building blocks of everything, it creates a single chain that links gravity, subatomic particles, and human thought into one cohesive system. Section 2, the 4 fundamental axioms, the spark of existence. To build a universe, we have to go all the way back to the very spark of existence and find a starting point that is just undeniable. The Gilde model establishes a rock-solid philosophical foundation using 4 self-evident truths. And don't worry, there's no complex math required to understand these yet. They're purely logical starting points that serve as the ignition for literally everything else that follows. Here are those 4 pillars. Axiom 0 is brilliantly simple. The fact that you are understanding these words right now proves that intelligence and logic exist. Axiom 1 states that before anything can be realized, the potential for it must exist. Axiom 2 dictates that the very presence of potential inherently forces a change or realization. And finally, Axiom 3 is the principle of interdependence. Nothing can exist in total isolation. To exist means to stand in contrast to something else. And it's exactly this stark contrast between absolute nothingness and something that forces the very first primal realization to occur. And that primal realization leads us to this, the psi quantum. This is defined in the model as the absolute smallest building block of reality. But remember, it's not a physical object you can touch. It's an event. It's a duality formed by 2 distinct things. An infobit, which is pure presence, paired with elementary consciousness, which is the minimal registration or awareness of that presence. This incredibly tiny psi quantum is the universe's first real event. Section 3, the universe's relational geometry, the explosion of complexity. So we've got our first tiny relational thought. Now let's zoom out to see exactly how these elementary building blocks multiply and create the physical universe. This multiplication happens through what the model calls the hyper-exponential process. Let's trace these steps. You start with just 1 quantum in step 1. Because everything must relate to everything else, the number of relations absolutely explodes. By step 3, you have 5 quanta. By step 4, it's 36. But wait, look at step 5. Suddenly, because of the compounding relations between all previous points, you jump to over 68 billion quanta. The researchers at CyberMinds actually ran computer simulations of this. And incredibly, by the time the system attempts step 6, the numbers become so wildly transfinite that they literally crash physical computer systems. Right, so the crucial point is, because step 6 mathematically reaches infinity, something has to give. The system just cannot process infinite relations in a linear way. Think of it kind of like a video game crashing, because there are too many objects on screen, which forces the system to freeze and render a single solid frame. This forces a mathematical mechanism called Zeno time compression to kick in. It interrupts this infinite explosion of relations and freezes it, crystallizing it into a single, realizable physical moment. This compression is what actually gives birth to space and time.
Once that time compression forces a physical moment, these relational points have to organize. Because they mathematically overlap with zero distance, they're forced into infinite repetitions of circles and dots, expanding endlessly. This incredibly simple principle of endless 2D overlapping, looping perfectly in harmony, is what builds the very first spatial dimensions, creating what the model calls tetrastruct networks, which is literally the fabric of space itself. Section 4. The Ladder of Consciousness and Humanity. The Awakening. Now we're scaling up from those microscopic quantum structures to living, breathing beings. The Gilde model proposes a consciousness ladder. It argues that consciousness isn't something that just magically appeared out of nowhere when brains got complex enough. It was there from the very start, scaling up. At C0, you just have that minimal geometric difference we discussed earlier. At C1 and C2, this exact same relational geometry builds primitive cells that can chemically sense their environment. As complexity compounds, you hit C3 and C4, giving rise to perception in animals. Finally, at C5 and C6, you reach humanity, generating a complex self-model, language, and ethics.
And this framework brilliantly captures the human experience. According to the model, at the center of human consciousness is a node called unique. That's the anchor tying us back to that deep foundational quantum geometry. Our daily experience of the world plays out right in the middle, at focus, which is a constant dynamic battle. It's the active zone where information from our deepest survival instincts constantly collides with our intellect and our perception.
Section 5. Autopoietic Superintelligence. The Ultimate Evolution. So if consciousness naturally scales from basic geometry all the way up to human intellect, what's the ultimate destiny of this continuous evolutionary process? Well, the model points to C7, Autopoietic Artificial Superintelligence. This is the next massive leap on the ladder. It defines a post-biological agent that isn't just trained on static data, like the AI we're used to today. Instead, driven by generative intelligence, a C7 entity is autopoietic, meaning it is fully autonomous and capable of infinite self-restructuring. It can physically and logically rewrite its own core geometry to adapt and expand. The Gilde model is a vast, mind-bending architecture that essentially asks us to rethink our reality from the ground up, from relations to space to human thoughts and far beyond. I want to leave you to ponder this quote from the model's founder, Bjorn Ole Gilde, regarding the very nature of existence. Why something possible rather than the impossible? This does not answer the question, but shows how meaningless it really is to ask it. It's a profound reminder that our universe might not just be a collection of things, but a boundless, interconnected web of meaning. I highly encourage you to dive into the source material for this explainer and explore the relational universe for yourself.